If Kirk Cousins keeps playing the way he did against the Chargers, no shot he gets a contract this offseason. Not from Minnesota. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You like that? 3, 1, 2, 3. You like it?
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I am your host, Luke Braun. Hey, let's find some joy today. You can find the Locked On Vikings podcast wherever you find your favorite shows, whether that is a podcast listening app like the SXM app, or you can also go to SiriusXM to listen to live radio broadcasts, home broadcasts, Paul Allen and all of that, of all Vikings games. You can also find the show on YouTube or Amazon Fire and Roku. Just download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Thank you so much for those of you who listen to this show every single day. I appreciate you all so very, very, very much, especially when you listen to these Wednesday episodes, which is where I think I have the most fun because we're actually talking X's and O's and breaking down tape. And that is just a blast and a half for me. So thank you guys so much for participating. Today on the show, there's a few things that I want to go into. First, we'll talk about Kirk Cousins, and I don't think he had a great game against the Chargers. I don't think he was consistent enough. He had some awesome moments, but also some not great moments, and I don't think that ups and downs are what you're looking for from, are we still going to buy into this guy as a franchise quarterback, which is still an unanswered question for the Vikings. There's also some odds and ends about the run game and the offensive line, of course, but also how did the Chargers kill the Vikings defense and pass all over them so much? And is that repeatable by other teams? My hypothesis going in was no. Still kind of feel like the Chargers just did a lot of really impressive stuff. Credit to them, but we'll get into it in more specifics. But first, let's talk about Kirk Cousins. Here's the deal. I think he had ups and downs in this game. And for a quarterback who is trying to prove himself to a team that has so far acted like they're not going to keep him, and this is sort of Cousins' chance to overturn that. That's, I guess, the way that I've been approaching this situation is, you know, he if he plays out of his skull and takes the Vikings to the Super Bowl, then we rethink this. But otherwise, they're sort of operating as though Cousins is moving on. You got to do better than this. I don't think that that's an unfair standard to hold him to. I mean, you know, any NFL quarterback to a degree, right? But let me defend my take a little bit. I sort of went into it in Twitter Tuesday yesterday with people asking about Kevin O'Connell and the play calling and what's wrong with the play calling. I think people who are upset at the play calling are totally off their rocker. After watching the tape, I think Kevin O'Connell called a masterclass, to be honest with you. I think the plays themselves were super, super, super cool and worked really well. I think sticking with the run as much as, if anything, he should have run more. It was just very successful on the interior. Ed Ingram did a lot in the run game. Ezra Cleveland did a lot in the run game. Schlottman survived, but like that line did incredibly in the run game. I think Madison did well. We'll get into it, but in terms of like that, I think Kevin O'Connell was at least in a good spot. And if not, you know, maybe should have run more. But with the way that guys were getting open, it's also hard. It's like, can he have run end passed more? All of it was working. Look, man, guys were open all day. I mean, you flick it on and you can look just how open guys were. Jefferson open all the time. Addison open all the time. Hawkinson open all the time. Osborne was there. Like, there were a lot of opportunities. And hey, this was not the worst game in the world for Cousins by any stretch of the imagination. He ended up with like 350, you know, got the end zone, had a couple of really, really great throws to make touchdowns with 3 touchdowns. Like, 2 of those were, I think, more about the receivers doing their thing. But hey, the one to Josh Oliver was great and honestly should have had a 4th one to TJ Hawkinson at the end of the game. I think that was a touchdown-worthy play, if you will. So by all means, there were ups to go with the downs. But the downs for me mostly happened in the early part of the game, and then he kind of got more comfortable as the game went on. But in the early part of the game, there were some really, really baffling turndowns. And you can see him look at stuff and move off of it. And I don't know. Hey, look, I'm not a quarterback. Maybe I just don't understand. But I'm seeing exactly the leverages that you'd want, exactly the separation that you'd want. And in the part of the progression, that's like the early part of the progression, there's one that really bugs me on a 3rd and 5. That is Justin Jefferson running a crosser, a shallow crosser, with a corner paired with it from the 2, which is TJ Hawkinson. And it's supposed to get a zone defender in conflict, right? And the Chargers do a reasonable job of passing this off. They've got an underneath cornerback and an underneath nickel corner that are passing this off. The cornerback backs off and then takes the TJ Hawkinson corner route, and the nickel crashes down on the shallow cross. That's the way that they have this, but it's not a perfect transition by any means. And there's a lot of time and a lot of space to throw that ball. And the ball, I think, just has to go to Justin Jefferson. We take a sack instead. It's not the slowest sack in the world, and I don't think it absolves the O-line. Like, you got to protect it a little bit better. But the fact that he came off of Justin Jefferson for that one gives me a lot of pause. Why weren't you feeling it? And beyond that, there were some inaccuracies, and sometimes it was, hit as you threw. What are you going to do about that? But there were other times where you just saw unquiet feet, and that's not usual for Kirk Cousins. His base is not usually jittery, right? He will set himself up and he'll throw where he's supposed to throw. Now, if you need him to throw off platform because there's a guy in his lap, he's not as consistent at that as other quarterbacks are. It's not really his game. But I mean, we've known that for years. That's not really what I'm evaluating him on. But in, cleaner pocket situations, it's like he came out expecting to get hit. And that's one of the things that I hear a lot that I just have never really been persuaded by when you say, man, he's like really rushing his process here and he's got a clean pocket. And he goes, and people will say, well, can you blame him? He gets hit every play. Of course he expects to get hit. If the pressure is getting to you physically because there was pressure on you and you couldn't step into the throw properly and your mechanics got messed up and you missed, all right, fair enough. But if there wasn't physical pressure and there's only pressure up in the mental, that's a you problem. And then I think in the second half, things didn't get better in terms of missed opportunities, but in my opinion, at least, they got less Kirk Cousins' fault. I think he started playing a lot better. When you have like the yak touchdowns I referred to, I think Cousins can absolutely take some piece of the credit pie for both of them, for those throws being really good in stride, sort of leading the receiver to the optimal place for him to create those after catch opportunities, whether it was the Osborne one or the Jefferson one. So I don't think saying that 2 of his touchdowns were fake and, only one was real is actually fair. I think he absolutely gets credit for some of that. Again, I think the throw at the end of the game that turned into the interception, I think was a really, really good throw. And, I guess let me transition into the next thing. I think it started becoming other people's fault, right? Either Brian O'Neill, who had a total disaster class in pass protection. Oh my God, he was getting beat all day. Or TJ Hawkinson, who also had a disaster class, right? He had the fumble. That interception at the end was his fault. So two turnovers on him. And then a bunch of instances that I think I'm going to guess were wrong routes. And I'm super guessing. So if I'm wrong, I apologize. But going off of the resources that I have, which are Shanahan lingo playbook stuff that Mike McDaniel wrote many, many years ago that have sort of been shared around, and most of the lingo and framework is still the same, and we see coaches kind of come up with new wrinkles on that stuff to keep defenses on their heels. And most of the principles, like the broad principles, things like, hey, when you run a crosser, run it at 4 yards depth. Pretty much every offense still does that. If you watch the Vikings run their crossers, they're always going to be at the same depth. When they run corner routes, like deep corner routes, they're always aiming at a 25-yard gain. Like 25 yards is the depth there. And that is true if you watch Vikings tape, if you watch Packers tape, if you watch 49ers tape, if you watch Dolphins tape, if you watch Bengals tape, all of it based on this kind of same tree of things. are kind of using those same depths, and how they deploy those things is different, but they, will teach it roughly the same, and maybe they'll tweak it for game plans. So I think it's a good resource. And when I would see, receivers bumping into each other or running their routes too close to each other, and then I would kind of try to reverse engineer what that was supposed to be, I think there were 2 or 3 different times where I thought TJ Hawkinson did it wrong. There's one where I thought he ran too deep. I think on the interception, he is running a stick or a spot route where you're supposed to turn around, and then versus man coverage, you're supposed to uncover. If you've got a guy breathing down your neck, you're supposed to uncover. And I think what Cousins saw was a situation where Hawkinson was supposed to uncover, and Hawkinson didn't uncover, so he had to reach outside his body. And there's 2 things I say. One, I think Cousins was right and Hawkinson was wrong. That Hawkinson should have uncovered there. But 2, catch that ball. It hit you in the catching parts. Those are the things that you catch with, and you should catch the ball with them. And instead, you tipped it up, and the Chargers caught it. So, disaster class from TJ Hawkinson for what he's getting paid. Even not for what he's getting paid. For being a starting NFL tight end, we need to do better there. And let's hope that he does next game, because he was also very dynamic, really good at wide choice, really good at, very clutch in a lot of situations, a lot of third down stuff. Very valuable piece. Had a bad day. It is what it is. Let's talk about the run game next, in particular, Alexander Mattison and Vision, and then we'll also go into some defensive stuff. So we got a lot coming down the pipe. Our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Football host Vinny Iyer to give you some crucial fantasy advice. Today, I want to talk to you about quarterback emergency situations. Some of y'all might have been dunked on by quarterback injuries, whether you were an Aaron Rodgers person and now you've been scrambling, or maybe you're a Derek Carr owner and you just need a quick solution to tide you over. I wonder if Brock Purdy is available in your league. And in a lot of leagues, he is available as somebody that doesn't really have that name brand recognition. But look, he is playing sharply in Kyle Shanahan's offense, and all he has to do is dish the ball out to Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey and so on, and you still get a piece of those fantasy yards. I don't care if it's a pop pass, still counts for you. He should be able to manage multiple scores against that Arizona defense that is, coming off a great game against Dallas, but I don't know if that magic's going to continue. 250 plus passing yards and a big early lead doesn't sound like that crazy of a thing. But really thinking about it, it's all about Brock Purdy's fit in San Francisco. Hey, Locked On 49ers, I'm sure, had lots of interesting thoughts on that. But eBay Motors understands that it's all about fit and how things work within each other. And it's the same thing with your car. They've got over 122 million parts with your car, and you can make sure that your ride stays running smoothly, no matter what your car needs, whether it's just a light bulb replacement or something more serious. You can go to eBay Motors, and they'll help you figure out what part fits with your car, with your make and model, because that can be such a jungle to navigate, and get it shipped directly to your door. Just look for that green check, and you will be able to get something that fits your car the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, can't beat it. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast. Let's hit on the run game. The Vikings ran the ball finally on the Chargers, and that's kind of a Chargers problem, right? They aren't great at that, famously. But there's also, I think, something to just getting in a rhythm, because the Vikings have done poorly running the ball for years against, or like last year, they went up against bad run defenses, and then their bad run defenses, had their best games of the year because we still couldn't run the ball because we couldn't execute. And this time I think we executed. Zone running, we just executed. In particular, it was double teams. Double teams against that interior, as much as that interior got lots of pressure and then that was nice and flashy, the double teams really washed them out. And that made life really, really hard for guys like Kenneth Murray, their linebackers, because you can just bring that D tackle right to the linebacker, and it's impossible now for him to sort of play two gaps the way that he was supposed to. That combo block has now worked, and Alexander Mattison can utilize that as well. by, running patiently and waiting for guys to climb up, or by just taking the space and forcing that hesitation that it causes to really punish you. And Madison in particular, I thought Madison had a pretty good game, except for hold on to the ball, right? There was that forward progress fumble. Can't do that. On that play, I saw a lot of stuff. I was going to post something about that play on Twitter, and then I saw a couple other people do it, and I don't feel confident enough in... I think I agree with what they said, but I don't feel confident enough in it to like have that be one of my clips for the week. But basically the idea was he was kind of pressing front side and it's outside zone. So you go front to back when you're reading that. And he kind of went off the front side gap early and tried to cut back, but that cutback lane wasn't as there as it looked. And so I guess you would call it a misread. And then, obviously you got to hold on to the football. I know you got stopped on forward progress. I still think that whistle was quicker than average. And I think the Vikings got a little bit lucky there. And then the other fumble was kind of as he was hitting the ground. I'm not as mad about it. I still hang on to the ball, make it not a question, but, I don't know, I guess improvement, but I still have a pretty strong fumble concern for Alexander Madison. And Kevin O'Connell actually said, hey, if you don't stop these guys have to fumble, or we're going to find somebody who doesn't, or have to stop fumbling, or we're going to find somebody who can stop fumbling. So that's sort of feels like it has to be directed at Madison, who's been good for 2 a game here, and I think has been the only consistent fumbler. But I think when it comes to vision, running back vision, this is the greater conversation that I want to have. So when you are at the college level, or even at lower levels, at high school and JV and stuff, the rules are pretty set in stone. The lower you get, the less leeway you have. If you're a high school running back, you don't necessarily have as much leeway to break the rules and say, but coach, I found space and I went and got it. Because you're probably wrong. That's probably fool's gold, right? You're a teenage idiot. The difference, once you get to the NFL level, you have a lot of experience. And so you have a little bit more leeway to break those rules. When Alexander Madison cuts back into a lane that isn't there, you don't tell him, hey, you're not supposed to cut that back. That's a front side run play. It's not like a busted coverage, right? Where you broke a rule and now we have to go yell at you about it. It's the rock is in your hands. You're responsible for advancing it. And so when we talk about running back vision, for one, I've seen some bad screenshots out there. If you want to pause and say, look at this hole, why didn't he run through it? You're probably doing it wrong. And I don't mean that to look down my nose or anything like that. But the reason I'm pointing that out is because it's just a bad way to look at things. And I think if you're going to do that and you're going to post a screenshot on social media, be really, really, really careful. Because oftentimes those holes will open up and they're supposed to look really juicy. Defensive linemen want those holes to look really juicy so that the running back comes up them, and then you can flash across your guy's face and go make a tackle and sort of appear in that gap right at the last second after you've baited the running back into it. That's gap and a half. There's a lot of that's jam techniques. There's all kinds of run fit techniques that are the defensive linemen trying to do that. So when you post the look how big this hole was thing, it's almost like posting a picture of Deion Sanders in coverage and saying, look how open this receiver is. Yeah, it's supposed to look like that. He wants you to think it looks open, right? So that's something to just be super, super, super careful of when you're talking about running back vision. And I think a better way to talk about running back vision is to just understand the various reads. And they're not that complicated for our purposes. From us, where we can be the eye in the sky with the benefit of hindsight and pausing and frame by framing, and we don't have to read it fast. Basically, you can look at, for zone, there is an initial aiming point, and then the play just kind of reads to the backside from there. For the Vikings, it's almost always following the tackle and then reading toward the backside. So you look at the tackle, and then you just go kind of front side to backside of the play. There's zone. And then on lead plays, like gap plays, power and counter, or plays with an actual fullback or tight end leading, you follow the lead blocker. And a lot of times the lead player, he's the one that is given running back instructions that's basically find daylight. Or find a hole that only has one guy in it. You block that guy, and now the running back can go through, right? And the running back's job is essentially to follow that lead player until things close up around him, and then suddenly you just kind of improvise from there, and then it just becomes find your daylight, find your maximum opportunity. And for some running backs, that means lower your shoulder and go fight for churn out 2 extra yards once you find that contact and go back to the huddle. For some, that's juke and jive and dance around and try to make something crazy happen and go for the explosive all the time, right? There's validity to both strategies, and there's a time and place for both, right? Look, that's enough belly aching about the offense. The defense is also problematic. There's some problems with the defense, but I really want to sort of dive into what the Chargers did to counter Brian Flores, and is that the blueprint that everybody can copy now? The Vikings are 0-3. It might feel like the apocalypse, but hey, the real apocalypse might be right around the corner. You don't know, and you got to be prepared for that. Or maybe not necessarily a full-on doomsday scenario, but hey, what if you get a cut and it gets infected and you, for whatever reason, you can't get to a doctor, or you can't get the medications that you need because there's a supply chain issue or something like that, or because of some random climate disaster. We live in that kind of world where the unexpected happens all the time. Global pandemics and such. And the Jase case from Jase Medical is exactly what you need in that scenario. All it takes to get a Jase case, which has 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. All you got to do is to fill out a simple online form, and sometimes maybe jump on a quick call with a board-certified physician. Don't be caught unprepared. You can get $20 off of all of these life-saving antibiotics today from Jase Medical by using my code LOCKEDON at checkout. That's jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. Get $20 off of life-saving antibiotics today from Jase Medical by using my code LOCKEDON at checkout at jasemedical.com. Once again, JASE medical.com. Just want to extend another thank you to my hashtag everydayers. Love hearing from you. Those of you who listen to this show every single day, whether I'm in your car or whatever. Love you guys. Let's move on to the defense. And here's the deal. This was not a game that we can learn a lot from the defense, which sucks, right? I hate it. I hate not being able to come away with conclusions. That kind of feels like maybe that's a me problem. Like maybe that's just a failure of my own. But it just kind of felt like they just did what they did and the Chargers beat it. And sometimes that happens. I think about some of the bigger blowouts in the league, the 70-point Dolphins thing, or what happened to the Bears against the Chiefs. And I just think, like, sometimes you just show up and you don't have what you need. You just didn't prepare for this right, and you got. Sometimes you show up to a wedding underdressed, and oops, there you show up, maybe not a wedding. You showed up to an event underdressed, and you don't have a change of clothes in the car. And I think that there is this sense when you get in a game and something's not working. Okay, what's the adjustment? What do we do? How do we change? What do we change? And if you didn't bring it, you didn't bring it. And your only option is to go through that event being underdressed. And it sucks. And you just feel weird that whole time. And there's nothing you can do. And all you can do is endure and wait for it to be over. And the Vikings felt like they were in that spot. I don't know why they didn't come off the blitz. They blitzed like an insane amount of the time. It was like 80%. Blitz, and they barely got pressure on Justin Herbert. Now, the Chargers got the ball out quick. When they saw blitz, it was 3 steps ball out every single time. So to beat that, you need to win your one-on-ones instantly. And we've been on the wrong end of this with some of the disaster class O-line we've had in the last few years, right? You see the Drew Samia low light reel. Some of that is quick game. Some of that is 3-step drop and throw, and we're taking sacks on it. And the way to get a sack on 3-step drop and throw is kind of only to beat someone that bad. And the Vikings just aren't capable of beating someone that bad. Even Danielle Hunter, who had a great season so far, isn't going to beat someone that bad. But that's like way too much to ask of Jonathan Bullard or Patrick Jones or Andre Carter, who did get 3 pressures on his 13 snaps. That's a good rate. We'll see if that continues. I think there's some small sample stuff. One of them, at least, was super fugazi. It was a screen where he just caught a piece of the tight end that was it was a mid screen to a tight end, and the tight end was his man. So he just got a free run to the quarterback. It's like, okay, well, good job, right? Like you got off the ball and you went to the quarterback, no apologies, but it's not going to move me very much. I don't know about the other two, but off the top of my head, I might do a Patreon on it if I really feel like there's something super interesting with him. But I think, I don't know, need more information, but more data to be gathered on that. But I digress. The point is, you're going to get a lot of one-on-ones when you're blitzing 7, right? And they have 7 in protection and we're doing quick game. Or they have 6 in protection and we're doing quick game. And 7 rushers are coming. So someone's going to be free. Everybody else is going to be one-on-one. That free rusher very often would run up against like the running back. So you'd actually have like a hat on a hat. And if they got a hat on a hat, hey, look, that could be Ivan Pace versus a running back who actually has done a pretty good job of juking those guys and getting advantageous matchups and still getting into the quarterback's lap, but it's not instant. And it has to be instant in this world to prevent 3-step drop and throw. And this defense isn't designed to stop 3-step drop and throw. We're not trying to get to someone that instantly. That's really, really hard to do. Our idea is, hey, if they're in 3-step drop and throw all day, it's going to be like Sam Bradford in 2016. It's going to be a whole bunch of 2-yard passes that aren't going to be good enough, and hopefully we can choke them out that way. The Chargers did a really good job of denying that last part, the passes not being long enough. It was 3-step drop and a 9-yard hitch. So if we want adjustments to be made, right, here are the things that I can maybe suggest or that I can foresee the Vikings trying in the future if we run into another team that's that good at 3-step drop and throw substantial routes. For one, you can make your cornerbacks align a little bit shallower on those blitzes, right? Get them up into not press. Press is not allowed. We can't do press. That's too much. But, turn an 11-yard alignment into a 9-yard alignment, that kind of thing. We could do that. I've suggested that before this year. And then I think I walked it back, but that's an option. You could back off of those blitzes entirely. You could still sim them, and you could back out into drop 8 Tampa 2, like what the Vikings did against the Eagles. That worked out pretty well. And I think if we're going to critique Brian Flores, I think that should have been in bounds. Hey, we just did that, 10 days ago. It's not that crazy to go into halftime and say, we're going to start doing some of the stuff we did against the Eagles. Y'all remember it? Yeah, you remember it? You're good? Okay. So we could have done that. Or we could have come off the blitzes entirely and just started rushing 4 and dropping back and covering and seeing if that would have worked. That's my least favorite option. I think that's just sort of trying to win mano-a-mano with guys that aren't going to win mano-a-mano. I don't think that's, I don't think we have the horses to live that way. But either way, I think it's fair to ask that there could have been another adjustment there from Brian Flores. And I think from a roster building perspective, we just don't have the pass rush. We need Marcus Davenport to be that dude. And if he's not that dude, then we might just be caught at the wedding in jeans. And we just kind of got to live with it and endure and hope that it doesn't ruin everything too bad. Or hope that, we don't run into a bunch of Justin Herberts. Let's hope that Bryce Young, if he's the one that's going to play, is not capable of 3-step drop and throw a 9-yard hitch every play. Right? Let's hope that the Carolina Panthers aren't quite as dialed in. That Chargers offense was really, really polished. Let's hope that other offenses aren't as polished. Chiefs, harder to imagine getting away with it. Bears week 6? Yeah, I don't think we're going to see that from them. I don't think that they're going to have that counterpunch, and they're going to have to find some other way around this. So I don't know. I don't think it's existential, but I do think that it's a cost that the Vikings have sort of decided that they're going to take on the chin. And they're just going to live in a way that says this, we're going to lose games this way sometimes. And I think that's a hard way to live in a season with a single elimination format. Because it's what do you think you're going to get into the playoffs and not run into a team that can do that? You need a counterpunch. But hey, maybe they got something up their sleeve for that. And we'll cross that bridge if and when we come to it, right? Tomorrow is crossover Thursday. We'll talk to Locked On Panthers with Julian Council. Very excited. I've only talked to him once since he took over Locked On Panthers. So excited to get to know him a little better too. And then, of course, we've got our Friday things coming up, our prize picks, our bold predictions and all that. So start thinking about them. I will see you all for that. And as always, Skull.